purport the title of the bill.
Senate 3331, an act to provide for universal inter-country adoption accreditation standards and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Ros Lehtinen, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Berman, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend and to include extraneous material in the record on this bill.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of S. 3331, the Inter-Country Adoption Universal Accreditation Act of 2012. This bipartisan bill, which recently received unanimous consideration in the Senate, is the Senate-side companion to H.R. 6027, which is the bipartisan House bill introduced by my good friend from New Jersey, Mr. Sears. This bill requires that all inter-country adoption providers in the U.S. meet the same accreditation standards regardless of whether the adoption is from a Hague Convention signatory country. Mr. Speaker, before I close, I would like to direct attention to yet another outrage perpetrated by Russian strongman Vladimir Putin, one that he has knowingly directed at innocent Russian children awaiting adoption. His action was a shameful response to legislation overwhelmingly adopted by the Congress that targets Russian officials engaged in human rights abuses, specifically those regarding Sergei Magnitsky. Magnitsky was a Russian lawyer killed in prison after having uncovered massive government corruption, including senior officials in Putin's regime. Instead of persecuting those criminals, Putin has instead cruelly chosen to target Russian orphans by banning adoptions by Americans. Tens of thousands of Russian children have been adopted by families in this country who have been given these innocents the love and the protection they otherwise would likely never have known. Now, countless numbers may be condemned to tragic lives knowingly sacrificed by Vladimir Putin in a sickening effort to show the world just how tough he is. Is there any additional proof needed of this despicable nature of this man and his regime? I call upon President Obama to tell Putin that the U.S. cannot and will not engage in a business-as-usual relationship with a regime so utterly devoid of humanity, a regime that deliberately tears apart the lives of its own children by depriving them the love of those Americans who wish only to give them, these innocents, a family and a better future. Let those in the administration turn their eyes from this outrage, explain to these orphans why they must be sacrificed for the sake of good relations with the Putin regime. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from California is recognized.